Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Down in the Country podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Reed, and today we're joined with another up and coming country music artist, Finis Smith. Finis, thank you again for your time today.
Man, thank you, Dylan, for having me out, and thanks for everything you do for us up and coming artists interviewing us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. And
Yeah.
you know, to start off the conversation, so your music includes inspirations such as Merle Haggard, George Jones, and George Strait. So how do you incorporate all three of those respective artists into your music?
So, I of course, and I think anyone would agree with me. Those are very traditional country artists, and that's what I grew up on. And I try to take the elements of like steel guitar, and I hope with my whole career, wherever that takes me, but to always kind of incorporate that steel guitar and fiddle. And of course, those three guys, I love their vocals. Try to take their phrasing and their strong vocal abilities, and kind of always incorporate that strong storytelling. I know George didn't write as much, but George Strait, George Jones did a little bit, but take some of the strong melody and writing of Merle Haggard. They all have their great little,
Mhm.
traits. I try to take a little piece of all of them when
Yeah.
I go to do something.
Now, is it like lyrically you pull from one, writing you pull from one, and then just like playing and singing you tend to pull more
I
from
feel
one?
like I feel like so, yeah, yeah. I try to take from all of them. They're the ones that my dad always listened to when I was growing up in listening in the feed truck and stuff. And but yeah, I try like when I think of Merle Haggard, he was like one of the ultimate country musicians in my opinion because and we're kind of seeing that a little bit with Zach Top right now. I feel like, but the dude was a really good actually guitar player. If people didn't know that, he wrote some great songs, and then he was a good singer. And of course George Jones is just such a strong vocalist, and in his career, and George Strait too. And but yeah, I'd like to try to take a piece of all of them.
Mhm. Awesome. And then, one of your tracks, and it's also it's one of my favorites, "Ain't Love Grand."
Yes,
Um,
yes.
could you provide an intro to that song? Like, what's the story behind it?
So the story behind that, I wish I had, but I did not write that track. And I was, looking for material. I was writing a little bit myself, and I was like, man, there's just nothing strong, as strong as I want to go out with my first single. So, I was looking, I knew I was gonna go to a studio in San Antonio, and these song, well, there was two, which might come out one day, I'll tell you about. But Ain't Love Grand was sitting at that studio just filed, and the engineer there said, "Yeah, man, listen to this. No one's ever messed with it." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is a gold mine. Like, this is a great song." And funny enough, I looked the songwriters up, and one was Bryce Long, which wrote like Gary Allen's "Nothing on But the Radio." He wrote a John Party song. I mean, he's just a prolific writer in Nashville. Look him up if you haven't heard of him. And then Noah Gordon, he had a little bit of success in the '90s, and I believe he's Shenandoah's manager now. He's maybe just doing managing work. But yeah, so two great, kind of Nashville artist songwriters did that, and luckily enough, I reached out to him and said, hey, I would love to record this track, and they said, yeah, go for it. No one something they wrote back in the '90s, and they just filed and never
Wow.
messed with. So it was like, just a little gold nugget there you find, lucky enough. And I kind of felt like the song was just sitting there waiting for me to pick it up and record it. And when we went in there, of course we were wanting that traditional sound, like we were just talking about, fiddles and steel guitars. And so that's kind of a little story behind it there.
Awesome. And do you mind if we play a clip of it?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Girl, until you came along, I thought love was a sad, sad song that just kept playing on and on and on. And still a mystery how an angel like you rescued me. Never knew dreams could come true. Oh, but now I know they do. Well, they love me like in the oasis in the desert sand.
So I like how in that particular track, like, it was kind of pretty even keeled, and then,
Yeah,
you kind of had, the fiddle was kind of had its part of kind of being kind of the
yeah,
driver, and then you had the guitar. Was that kind
yeah.
of what you were envisioning?
Yeah, that was, I've always kind of been that was a gut string guitar. Always been a fan of that. So I was kind of like, we were in there, had one of the guys say, "Hey, could you think you could throw a little gut string on here and see what you could come up with?" And he's like, "Yeah." So that kind of was, letting that linger going through there playing, and then as we're building up, add the fiddle there,
Yeah, awesome.
and that
And
was.
and what was the writing to recording process like for this song?
So the writing and recording, finding that song and uh and it already being written and securing, making sure that that I could release that and such if it was tied to any different publishing deals back in the day with them. So yeah, it was free, and then I booked the studio time there in San Antonio, and we got it cut. And fun fact on that, we were talking about that before this, but I had a Ronnie Huckabee, which is George Strait's current piano player, been with him, I believe, since the early '80s. So it was fun to have him in there, and
Wow.
put a little good pressure on me. I kind of had to try to sing my best George Strait there. No,
Don't mess. He was, were you thinking to yourself, "Don't mess this up, Finis"?
yeah, I was like, don't mess this up. Yeah. And it was funny when I was in there right before they were singing, they said, "Man, I could hear George Strait singing this song." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. No, this is mine, he's had enough. What, 61 number ones. I think he's good." So
Yeah. So, bonus track. So, what's the story behind "You're Only Lonely"?
You're Only Lonely. So that was another fun project that really was not planned. Ain't Love Grand was planned out like any kind of single or EP is. You're Only Lonely wasn't. So through my record promoter, a radio promoter, Greg Austin, he also works with a legendary guy down here in Texas called Daryl Dodd, or his name's Daryl Dodd, and been in the business down here, since the mid '90s, and I'd always admired his work. So I was telling Greg, "Hey man, I'd love to collaborate, do something with him." So we finally got on a call one day, and Daryl actually made a track back in his day that I've loved, a Tom T. Hall song called "How I Got to Memphis Famous." Kind of gave it a new breath of life back. I forgot when that was cut. I believe it was the late '90s. But so I'd always admired that he did that, and then he did like Gordon Lightfoot's "Sundown," a couple different deals. So I said, "Hey, do you think we could find an older song that has been recorded and try to breathe some new life into it? Pay homage?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, when I was listening to you, he's like, "I thought you should really do your spin on this. You're Only Lonely." And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard that before. I need to, familiarize myself with it again." So I went back and listened, and I remember J.D. Souther wrote it, which is a great, Southern California writer, wrote with the Eagles, and you know, uh, a bunch of different songs there with those guys, and Jackson Brown. So we were like, "Yeah, let's do it." So a week later, we're in the studio cutting this thing. In no time. It was a very quick process, and then the next day we did it on a Thursday, and that Friday we released it. So it was a fun little deal, and stuff like that's fun when it's spontaneous and you don't really know, and sometimes you put your best work into things like that when you don't overthink it. So I enjoyed that part of it.
Awesome. And do you mind if we also play a little clip of that too?
Yeah, let's go for it.
When the world is ready to fall on your little shoulder, and when you're feeling lonely and small, you need somebody there to hold you, so you can call out my name when you're only lonely. Now don't you ever be ashamed when you're only lonely.
I love that, kind of got guitar and fiddle solo that you added in the middle there.
Yes, yeah. That was, we were thinking about maybe not having a guitar and lead guitar solo in that. And I told her, I was like, "Man, like, let's, the guys in here, we're paying him for his time." I was like, "Let's try it," and we did, and we liked what he came up with. So
Yeah.
um and we tried on that track. So I don't know if you ever listened to the original version of that, but it had, it was big production. It had background vocalist kind of replying to him and all that stuff. So we were like, no, let's cut that back and simplify this. And Daryl had a great idea of to have the steel guitar kind of be the background vocal. So they kind of took the place in spots and tried to respond back. So that was, kind of fun to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but your version could be like a wedding song, like a first dance.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've always thought that about both of them, actually, Ain't Love Grand and that one. So, that I know of, no one's done it, but I hope someday somebody, uses it. So,
Yeah. And, so that, for You're Only Lonely, you were saying that it was spontaneous, but like, what was the recording process like for that one? And what was the difference between that particular track and Ain't Love Grand?
so that track, what was nice about it when we did Ain't Love Grand, we did three different songs. Two haven't been released yet, but we went in there in one day and cut three. The nice thing with You're Only Lonely is over a 2-day process we recorded the one. So I felt like I was able to really soak up more because I've only been in the studio the 2 times now. So I was able to soak up more of the atmosphere and really watch, a guy like Daryl Dodd go to work as a producer and the great things he was able to direct those guys and kind of lead them into what he was wanting, and then ask me like, is this what you're wanting? It was a fun process in that. It was a great learning experience for a young guy like me.
Hmm.
So it was nice to have the slower pace in that, so
Hmm. And it's interesting because both of those tracks, kind of it sounded like you kind of really applied kind of that 90s country music kind of with the upbeat
yes.
tempo and lyrics. So how are you able to take that and apply it to these songs? Or like
You
was
know,
it a challenge?
it is in the sense of, I mean, we've all heard it, but you want to create your own sound.
Uh-huh.
Any artist does. So you're like, how can I let this influence me without just being a copy of something? But listening to those iconic kind of certain pedals that the lead guitarists used back then and the sounds of the steel guitars and fiddles and that aren't as utilized as much in certain kind of subgenres of country now. I think we're going to be seeing more come back in the future here, but yeah, just trying to really soak up those different instruments and the way they kind of would utilize them through songs.
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah, because it's interesting because listening to your music, and and I was very curious about this. I don't know how you would categorize it, but it seems like you're kind of mixing kind of that old Texas country kind of with the new, I guess you could say, Nashville country pop, or would you say it's more of like a Texas country 2.0?
Yeah, probably it is I mean, a version of Texas country. That's the thing is, people always say Texas country, but really Texas country has so different many genres within it. I mean, there's kind of there's a little deal of southern rock kind of Texas country. That's kind of gets into the red dirt, and there's different styles. But yeah, it'd be a version of Texas country. And
Hmm. Awesome. And so I'm just curious. So when you write a song or when you have an
mhm.
idea for your song, do you think to yourself like guitar comes first, drums come first, like the writing comes first, or kind of what's the brain of Finis Smith like when he sits down and is like, I want to create the next version of art?
Yeah. I'm very, very new to the songwriting, but hadn't been doing it just a terribly long time. But from what I've been doing is trying to kind of find a good kind of melody, and start writing with that and just kind of building off that. Now, sometimes I'll have an idea of if I'm messing on the guitar and hear a little riff, and I'm like, man, like I want to try to create something with this, or I need to remember this or save it, audio record it, and then kind of. But I don't think of the instruments quite yet. You try to get in there, and you'll have ideas, but there's some great players out there that you get to bring in the studios, and it's just amazing what those guys sometimes can throw out there too. And
Hmm.
but yeah, sometimes it just kind of comes to you, you know what I mean? It's always funny. It comes when it needs to come, and right place, right time. That thought of where to put a certain instrument or this or that,
Yeah, because
and
it's
and it
like,
may change. You may go in with a one idea, and then you're like, whoa, that's not even feasible now. I need to change this. So,
yeah.
but
And And do you think about when you're putting together music, you're like, it has to be like this key, or else if it's off, then it's not going to sound good? Or does that, or you just like throw out ideas out on paper and whatever, whatever sounds.
Well, yeah, so I try to beforehand, of course, go over the song practice. And I mean, you want to always make sure, an instrument sounds good or it's not a kind of wonky key or any of that, but I always feel like a vocalist should put it in a key that makes their voice sound the best they can. And I've heard stories of guys, being rushed or this or that and putting it really where their vocals probably shouldn't have been, and they get by with it. But I think it should always go around the vocals.
Hmm.
Where can the vocalist shine? What's that sweet spot? Because everyone has their sweet spot register. And
Hmm.
that's I try to do that for me. So
Yeah, because
um,
it's yeah, no, because it's and that's what I really loved about those particular tracks you recorded is like, yeah, like, the guitar was really pronounced, the fiddle was heavy really pronounced, but your voice, in whoever like, mixed and mastered it, did a great job. Like your voice didn't really overpower any of the instruments.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. We wanted a good balance of everything. So, and I've noticed that sometimes, it can get sometimes, with the mass produced pop areas, and sometimes it can get kind of muddied down, and stuff. So it's nice to let everything shine, the vocals and the instruments in their spot of the song. So
Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I really liked how in those tracks you kind of combined kind of that, you know, I don't know if you would just, I would think it's raw, meaning like it's like you could like totally have the feeling behind, like, how there's some artists that like whenever they sing, or if that there's that song and they can just draw you in, it's like you have that talent or you
yeah,
just don't.
yeah,
That's when I was listening to like Ain't Love Grand and You're Only Lonely, like you like totally pull the listener in.
yeah. Well, thank you. That was what I wanted to do. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I was
You
like,
know.
oh wow, it made me realize, or made me think about like, oh, being from Texas kind of brings me back to earth a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like if you write a song or not anything, it's you've gotta sell that song. And I think in any song, and you probably experienced this where you hear something and you're like, man, like I feel that, or I can relate to that. So,
Yeah,
it's a good feeling when you hear a song, you're like, man, yeah, that's me, or this, or I feel that way. So
yeah. Well, and and it's interesting. So you actually came from a family that was pretty musically talented too, as
yes,
well.
on my mom's side, yeah. And my dad didn't do much music, but he was actually in the entertainment industry as a stuntman in California. So I get a little bit of that showmanship from him and in spots. So, but yeah, on my mom's side, there was a long line of musicians that I guess I heard back in the day. They were all gone before I was born, but did square dances and barn dances and different things back in the day.
Hmm.
So
And you started on the fiddle, right?
I did, yes. Yeah, I was about 13 when I first started that, and played it a while and then kind of got away from it. I got big into track, and I went to college and ran track. And then when I got into college, I was like, I started going to bars and I'm like, man, this looks fun. And I kind of had this yearning for my music, that I used to play. So I was like, I need to start taking lessons again. And I found an old guy down there in Stephenville, and he started teaching me. So it was good to get back to it, and I'm glad. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't be where I am. So
Yeah. When you started picking up the fiddle, were you like, this is what I was meant to do?
you know, I always felt like I had a talent, but I at that young of an age, I was just enjoying it,
Hmm.
and it was a thing. It's when I got older and started playing, I was like, man, I think I need to try to explore this and see where I could take it. So I guess I realized when I was a little later. I wish I would have realized right there at 13 and put all the time and effort in, that I did with track. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm playing catch up a little bit, but it'll be fine. It'll all even out.
Yeah. What's the saying? Like, you're never too old to start something new, or
Yep.
something like that.
Yep, that's true.
So,
Yep.
yeah. But so, so you're from the town of Ivan, Texas.
Yes.
So, and you worked on, your family ranch
Mhm.
out there. You still do. So,
Yes.
how have you
Still.
been able to apply your experiences in your songs, with specifically with the town of Ivan and working on the ranch?
So the funny thing about Ivan, there's only about 5 people. It's one of those little small towns. But with the wide open spaces, and like we've been messing with some songs recently. That maybe we might record here in the future. Trying to write about the landscape. Some of the beauties, and drawing some of the different landmarks that I grew up as a child, and tying experiences as a child on the ranch. And different hardships that come with the life of living out here. So there's a lot. It really molds a person, I feel like. And
Hmm.
blessed to be here. Been here 25 years. Still live here on the ranch I was born at. So, you
Wow.
know, it's cool. But yeah, there's so many different things you can learn from seeing the cow give birth to the hardships of it raising that calf, and then the beauty of a big grand old oak tree out in the pasture, and wondering like what did that thing see, and like what there's so many cool things. And
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and is Ivan so, I've never been, but is it pretty similar to, like, the hill country, like, by Austin, San Antonio?
there people use it. I don't know if it's really like documented as this, but in this area, sometimes people use the term North Texas Hill Country, and they call that the hill country down there. So we've got some rolling hills, but it would be kind of the plains, so some more kind of flat grasslands, and but it's a pretty spot. I love it. So
Mhm. And it's, how's the cattle raising going, though?
cattle's going good. Prices are high. I just took a load last week up to Oklahoma and sold them in Comanche, Oklahoma. So it was good, and got that done. So now I'm been hanging them today because it's cold down here, and we're getting ready. They'll start calving here in March, so we're trying to get them all fat and happy, and get them ready to go again. So
Wow. And you don't, I remember us talking offline, so you don't do any of the milking or any of the slaughtering?
no, no, we don't do any dairy. I do just a cow calf. So we take a girl, a mama cow, and we'll raise a calf. And then we'll send it on down the road for someone to kind of finish it out and take it to slaughter. So
Wow. And I've always been curious, like, how do you know when a cow has, like, been overgrazing or not?
well, if a cow has been overgrazing, your land, you're gonna tell. So, and that happens sometimes. Some people just neglect the land, and sometimes through drought and natural things. If it's a hard year, but your grass, of course, it'll all be gone, and your cow will look poor. It'll start showing a little bit of rib, and it'd be like anyone that's not, just kind of malnourished. So, um,
Yeah. I mean, because it looks like it's just a lot of work just making sure that
it
the fields are
It
well
is.
maintained.
It's something I say we're all that are born into it. We do it because we love it. It's not for the money. And there's a lot of us that probably, what's that saying, run while you can,
Yeah.
but somebody's got to do it, and there's a lot of great life lessons in it, and it brings a lot of happiness, to a lot of people I know. That's
Mhm.
it's a thing. We get kicked down and knocked down, and we just keep getting back up and doing it. So
Yeah. And, so the type of cattle you raise is called Hereford-Angus?
Hereford, well, so Hereford and Angus are two different breeds, and I mix them. So I predominantly have female
Mhm.
cows, Angus, and then I'll have a Hereford bull, and I'll put them on that, and I'll get a mixed breed, which is Black Baldy, Motley.
Okay.
There's kind of two different names on that, but yeah, so I'll do that. So it'll be like a black cow with a white face, or kind of spotted up white face. So
Oh, wow. So kinda like
yeah.
the ones you see, I don't know if they still have them, but, like, years ago, they had them in the Chick-fil-A commercials.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a more of a milk cow there, but yeah, kind of a little bit more black. It would look like that, but it's trying to take the best of both breeds. Some of the great qualities of an Angus and a Hereford, and trying to mix it.
Mhm.
So
And how big is would you say, like, someone like yourself, like, raise like, how many cattle do you raise?
so right now I have let's see, through all the pastures we have the Longhorns. I've about a hundred cows and about 4 bulls. So and then I'll raise 100 calves. So essentially, if I have a great rate on my calf crop, I could have 200 on the ground with their moms and babies. So, and that's enough to keep me busy. So
Wow.
there's some guys, I mean, if you get into, I'm a smaller operation. I mean, there's guys that running 500s, big number, and then of course there's guys that get into the thousands. So depends how much ground a guy has, or at least country. So
Wow. I mean, just with 100 and, like plus, like that's like a small army right there.
yeah, it is. It is. So, and they're funny. They all have their unique, personalities. So
Yeah.
um,
You
they're
don't
like
have,
people.
yeah, you don't have to turn on the TV for some entertainment.
No, no, you don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, you kind of figure out like this cow doesn't like this and that cow doesn't like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's
crazy.
it's funny to watch them. So
And you know, and I know that we've also talked offline too about boot skin. So like, do you have like a particular brand of boot skin that you recommend to look more Texan?
I ought to look Texan. I think a guy could, wear anything, but my favorite, I've got a lot of rough out. It's
Mhm.
where they take the not the slick side of leather, they'll take the inside, the rough side, and I like that. And then a good clean pair of ostrich boots. They look nice. If you're going out for the night or gonna go play a dance, like I do. So
Awesome.
uh,
And the ostrich boots, those are not work boots, correct?
no, I mean a guy, if you got the money, you could. You can do anything you want, but I would save them for your nicer outings. So
Yeah. I have a funny story. Like I was in Nashville once and I like walked into the Lucchese boot store that's,
oh yeah.
in the Gulch. And I swear, like I looked at one of the price tags and and I'm not kidding, it was like $5,000
Yeah, yeah. They were expensive.
for a pair of
Lucchese's,
boots.
they're good quality, but they pride themselves. So
Yeah. I mean, it's probably like, what is it? Like those boots probably last like 20 something years too, as well.
funny enough, I mean, I've got you're right. I've got a pair of dads in there, that are he's had for 30 years. They just keep reselling them. So, there's that saying, granddaddy's boots, pass them down. Or, I mean, it's true. A good pair of boots will last.
Hmm.
So.
No, definitely. And the last question I have for you is, what do you want your contribution to be in country music?
I would, like to look back on my career, when I'm an old man, and think that I kept, the flame of traditional country music alive, and made a great contribution to putting out some legendary songs. I think any artist would want to have, those songs that are always identified as, you know, just classic country songs. So, just I just want to keep though mainly the flame of what tradition, is. I think at least I know it could be different for anyone, but just kind of keep the voices of George Strait, George Jones, and Merle Haggard, all those guys alive. So.
Awesome. And Finis, where can people learn more about you as well as your music and any shows, EPs, singles, albums?
Yeah, so I have it pretty much clean now, I believe. So on all streaming platforms, it's Finis Smith, like iTunes, all that, and then Instagram, Facebook, and we'll see where TikTok goes. But TikTok is Finis Smith Music, Finis, and so yeah, YouTube, all that. So we're everywhere, and we got a web page. Jennifer made that, and she did a really good job. So they can find us anywhere.
Wow. And you're also playing. You play mainly still in Texas, correct?
Yes, yeah, I'm in Texas. We had a gig. We were in Oklahoma last fall, Oklahoma City. But we're gonna start venturing out more and more. So I think we'll get out there.
Awesome. And be sure to subscribe to Down in the Country podcast YouTube channel and also listen to the audio version of this on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Finest, thank you so much again for your time today.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Same here. And this is Dylan Reed signing off.